meeting a nurse at a hospital late one night as we were waiting for the elevator, and it had been a long day, and I asked her how she was doing, and she said, "I'm blessed." And it changed the way I thought about that question. I shared that story with our Chinese-American adopted family now. And so if you're ever in the Bay Area and you ask somebody how they were doing and they say blessed, I probably met them. And you can share that too, and you have that link and that heritage, that spiritual heritage in common. It's good to be with you all. The news this week has been heavy, hasn't it? One thing after the other. Give yourself some time away to keep perspective and remember other things going on, not to discount the truth and reality about what's happening, especially literally in our own area, in our own backyard, so to speak, but all over. ISIS. What else has been going on in the news this week? Michael Brown, of course, Ferguson. What else? What's that? Ukraine. Mm-hmm. Robin Williams, somebody said? Amish girls being kidnapped. Mm-hmm. So as Christians, what do we do? What can we do? In our scripture today, there are two parts, and so just to add a little bit of context to the gospel text today, Jesus is on his way out of this conversation with the Pharisees where he basically challenges them and says, in love, but says to them, it's not what goes in, but what comes out. That's your witness. And it goes on with this experience. He crosses the Sea of Galilee into Gennesaret, which is the plains northwest of Galilee. And he's with his disciples, his buddies, his posse or whatever, and he's crossing, and he wants to teach them something. We don't know exactly what that is, but it does say that he wants to spend this time with them to teach them something. And he's going into Gentile territory, and we have this encounter with a Canaanite woman who recognizes who Jesus is and has faith that he can heal her daughter. And it's important to understand this whole context in this string of events. And that's where we get, especially in our Rite One liturgy, we get this phrase about the crumbs and the dogs. And as Canaanites, he refers to her and her people as dogs, which was a common saying. And then in true kind of Palestinian culture, there's this exchange of wit. And she I'm sure, stands up straight and gives it right back to him. And he says, great is your faith, and your daughter is healed. I was thinking about this whole exchange of the Pharisees, Jesus, of course, the disciples, the Canaanite woman, and the daughter whom we don't meet, but we know is healed. And I was thinking about the different stories that are going on simultaneously in this whole gospel account, and the beauty of God's compassion and love and grace and mercy to be present through the whole thing, so that the fruit of the gospel is present by the end of the story. A healing takes place. God has been present and touched the life of so many people. And whatever lesson Jesus went there to teach the disciples gets interrupted. This holy interruption happens. Anybody ever have any holy interruptions in your life? Jesus is even challenged. And in some way, I don't know about you, but to me, that's comforting to know that he almost misses the point. Because he says, I'm here for the sheep of Israel. And she says, but even the dogs get the crumbs under the master's table. It's in all that Jesus says yes. And he's brave in saying yes. How do we, as Christians, in our Christ-likeness, made in the image of, how do we bear witness to the good news in our life? thinking about all these stories going on, all these characters, if you will, in this plot. And then in our own scenarios, to pay attention to the moments that we have with people. It was just August 2nd, Saturday morning, August 2nd. I just finished my week of classes in San Anselmo at the seminary there, and I went in to rent a car. The nearest place is in San Rafael, which is just a couple of miles down the road. And a friend took me there, dropped me off, and I'm inside, and there's two guys at the counter. An employee that I talked to on the phone comes up, and we start exchanging dialogue and paperwork and so forth. And I'm renting a car to drive from San Rafael to pick up Abby and Colleen in Reno, because obviously they weren't with me that first week of school. And then at one point, all three employees leave, and they go out the back door to get our cars and check on our cars. And it's just the three of us. There's no music even, it's just quiet. And for a couple of minutes, we're standing there, and I looked over to my left, and there was, a guy there. We just kind of acknowledged each other, and, guys don't talk a whole lot in that situation usually. There's this sort of head thing that goes, it's like this, and that's it. I looked over to the next guy, and I thought, man, that profile looks familiar. And with lime green running shoes and black running pants and a black t-shirt and sunglasses was Robin Williams. And a flood of things go through your mind. I've never seen him before, and I'm, of course, a big fan. And also know that he grew up Episcopalian. So I had all these things going through my mind. I thought, well, maybe he'll let me take a picture with my phone, which is like the modern day autograph thing. Maybe I can do it and say, no, I can't. Maybe the man just is trying to rent a car, I just need to give him peace. Was kind of where I settled. And so I didn't say anything to him. And then, obviously, not long after, got the tragic news about his death. The reason I mention that to you is because the story that was going on within me and what kind of haunted me about that moment, and again, all kinds of things run through your mind. But the story that was going on within me was, there's a celebrity, a star. I wonder what I can get out of that in kind of a crass way, I didn't want to be crass, but that's kind of where I was putting him. And what haunted me was, here was a person, a brother who walks on this planet, who's dealing with his own story. And of course, now we know more about that, don't we? The tragedy and that, and obviously his decision around that. But without judgment, just to say, for a couple of minutes, we're standing in the same room together, different stories, different perceptions, different interpretations about what's going on. Jump ahead. I was reading this book, all this kind of happening, God incidents or serendipitously, reading this book, millions of these books out, called Crucial Conversations. Maybe you've heard of it. It has 4 authors. Crucial Conversations. And it's a book about dealing with conflict and when emotions are high, stakes are high in a relationship, how you navigate that. And they're basically 4 parts. And I encourage you to look into it if you're interested. But just for the sake of today, 4 basic parts. There's the stimulus, when something happens. There is the story. There's the feelings that come out of that. And there is the action, the behavior that follows. Stimulus, story, feeling, action. And the authors say that in crucial conversations where stakes are high, that it is at the point of the story that makes the biggest difference. If people have different narratives and they're not able to hear one another, in other words, then the feelings that are derived from that narrative that they've interpreted causes a certain set of actions. And people can go in different directions, and it's harder to bring them back. So at the point of the stimulus, there's a shared experience, and then the story is to share and hear, listen, wholly listening, what the other person's account was. What I began to understand is a deeper respect for the gift of story and for the time that we take to really listen to ourselves and to one another. As some of you know, the trip was wonderful, but we had a terrible time trying to get back. It was almost like a planes, trains, and automobiles sort of comedy, although we were living it. And I'll have to, if you'll oblige me, I have to brag on Abby and say she was the best sport out of all three of us. She did great. But as we were stranded in Reno, and they switched airlines for us and told us to get on a plane to go to Phoenix, where we ended up missing a flight and getting stuck again. It was at that point that I was like, I have enough. And I'm going to the customer service department to talk with them while we're here for the next 6 hours. And spoke my piece. I didn't yell or anything like that. But they very politely listened, and they gave me back the proper management training spiel. And I realized that now I was on the receiving end of different stories. All this sort of strings together in a jazz kind of way. And I thanked them for listening, and I walked away with an email address in case I wanted to offer additional feedback to whomever. We get on the plane, and we're going to Phoenix. Of all poetic names, Phoenix. And 2 seats in front of me, 2 rows, in the exact same seat, 2 rows in front of me, there's a little boy, and I'm impatient by this time to get there, get on the plane, let's go, let's get there. And the captain comes out and takes the microphone from the flight attendant and says, "We have a very special guest on our plane today." And I started to sit up a little straighter.